Hello, welcome, and this is the Union Part 2, Salvation Through Betrayal. In the end, as the bloody years trailed by redemption came from the same quarter that had provided the tools of destruction, one of the most brilliant scientists in the Enlightened, a young Serbian by the name of Nikola Tesla, was horrified by the bloodshed and the unending pain Carpathian and his peers had unleashed. Against the counsel of the others, more conservative Enlightened, and his patrons from the Prussian Imperium, Tesla travelled from Europe to the Union and offered his expertise and assistance in ending the war. The government in Washington, headed by the beleaguered Abraham Lincoln, knew at once that they were being offered and accepted graciously. The most senior general of the armies, the Union, Ulysses Grant, was quick to see the advantages as well. They were essentially being offered the chance to field advanced weaponry the Confederacy could not hope to match. They would launch an offensive the rebels would have no means of countering. Grant's family had been murdered and he had been hideously wounded by a raiding party armed with these new hellish weapons early in the war. As a result, he had developed a hatred of both the Enlightened and the Confederacy. This attitude had only hardened through the grinding endless years of conflict. Knowing now that his opponents would be helpless before him, he would not wait for a moment more than necessary for Tesla to supply a small unit of soldiers with his lightning guns. They were dispatched on raiding missions, deep behind enemy lines, to make a show of force and shock the rebels. It was hoped that it was into quick submission. Just in case they proved recalcitrant, however, Tesla was given control of the pipeworks, a massive manufacturing center in Washington, to convert his own compound of factories, laboratories, and staging areas. If the war were to continue past this moment, the Union would not lack for these new weapons. The final crescendo. The Union soldiers learned all too soon that possessing more deadly weaponry than the enemy does not necessarily rob the enemy of their lethality. The battles that ensued were perhaps even bloodier than that had gone before. But Tesla's new technologies were terrible to behold, capable of blasting the life from the enemy soldier, no matter their protection. Men who were fried alive while piloting the massive armored vehicles, or were seared into the hereafter as they slept in their fortress barracks. The skies of a self-flared electric blue with the power of Tesla's inventions, and the Confederacy, no matter how brave their soldiers or savvy their generals, could not hope to stand against them. Just as Tesla's weaponry came into use, the Confederacy had dug into at Petersburg, less than 150 miles south of Washington. This was the place from where they could defend Richmond, the capital of the embattled Confederate States. Between the two cities, virtually all of the strength of the Confederate Army was deployed in a defensive posture, and all but one of the Union generals agreed that it would be impossible to dislodge them, despite Tesla's magnificent weapons, without horrendous loss of life. Ulysses Grant, however, felt differently. He did not question that there wouldn't be casualties. He only disagreed with his colleagues on one salient point. He believed the losses would be worth victory. They would secure. Pushing the south from Washington with the Army of the Potomac, Grant made first to crush Petersburg, thus eliminating the final military threat to his forces, and then push on completely raze Richmond, the spiritual and political capital of his enemies. Grant was brutal and merciless in these final attacks. As the Confederate command tried to rally their forces in Richmond for the final battle, Jonathan Stonewall Jackson, their most gifted field commander, did his best with the orderly retreat from Petersburg. Unfortunately, he was ambushed, with his vanguard just 10 miles from safety. His body was carried from the field, his ultimate fate lost amidst the chaos of running battle. Jackson's loss was the final straw for Confederate President Davies, as Grant began to rain down hellfire on Richmond, and the entire city burned. Davies instructed General Lee to sue for peace, making certain that offers of surrender were carried to President Lincoln himself. As they felt Grant might be too inclined to ignore them in favor of his great blazing victory, Lincoln accepted the conditions of surrender, immediately commanding Grant to cease his attack. Nearly 3/4 of the city of Richmond had been destroyed as the last fire went out, and the Confederate army was utterly shattered, with less than a tenth of fighting strength remaining. The road back By late 1865, the war was over, but the Union's wounds ran deep. 6 million souls, almost a fifth of the total population, had died or would not survive their wounds, while the South was largely devastated. In addition, there was even greater threats rising all around. The Crown, always eager for an easy opening, attacked the Union both financially and militarily, weakening them from abroad. In the West, the indigenous tribes threatened to halt westward expansion, if not unleash outright invasion. Coupled with this was the ever-present fear that while that war was unlikely, a resumption of small skirmishes would erupt again south of the Mason-Dixon line. It was clear that the Union Army could not be disbanded or reduced to pre-conflict levels. The war might have ended, but this was not certainly peacetime. The Union continued to function as it had. The war, with conscription and recruitment, continued apace. Service in the army was seen in many quarters as the greatest honour one might achieve. It became fashionable for the most wealthy and best families to send their second-born sons and daughters to officer training to serve. Sacrifice and unity. As Union society shifted to acknowledge and accommodate the need for well-trained, well-prepared standing army, most states saw more and more of their surplus resources going back into a military who had already won its war. A massive bureaucracy stretched out from Washington to oversee taxation and other support activities to ensure peace and slow recovery of a brutalized country. Sacrifice was the watchword on the thin lips of these agents, and the government and sacrifice was a national virtue they embodied. The one remarkable aspect of the Union compared to the other major powers is the relative unity of its populace. Since the abolition of slavery in the country, after the War of Independence, black citizens have become steadily more integrated into the country's population, and those of Latin descent are following suit after acquisition of the bulk of the Spanish-speaking lands. North and Central America, so much so that Spanish is close to gaining recognition as an official language alongside English. The overall effect is that where many empires encompass many different peoples, societies and creeds, the people of the Union, whatever their origins, are slowly but surely coming to think of themselves primarily as one people, united by a common cause, the survival of liberty. The men and women of the Union were not alone in their sacrifices. It became painfully clear to President Lincoln that he could not rule effectively with such a diverse array of enemies and challenges rising up against him. The nation needed to be able to respond to these countless threats with a speed and versatility that the founding fathers had not just imagined. He was best suited of all men and women alive to shepherd his beloved nation back to peace, but he could not do it from the White House. The death of a president. Using his ever-expanding web of agents to assist him, Lincoln plotted his own assassination. In 1866, enlisting an actor, friend of his son's, a man who truly believed in the Union and what it stood for, plans were laid for a massive public attack that would seemingly result in the president's death. He would then be free to assume more direct control of the very defences of the nation, while his vice president, Andrew Johnson, a capable bureaucrat with little to no imagination or drive, would be left as a figurehead to rule in his place. Knowing that, for the ruse to succeed, he would have to die, John Wilkes Booth was not afraid to give his life for his nation. As planned, there was a struggle, and a juice blaster roared within the confines of a small private theatre box. When the smoke cleared, the world reeled at the death of the president. Even his own family believed he died that night. The sacrifice that night was by two men. Booth was caught as planned and killed for his actions, and Lincoln would never be allowed to return to his private or public life again. Abraham Lincoln was now relieved of the trappings of office. He was free to move out into the wide world in order to lead his extensive army of gifted killers through the shadows, conducting the infinite number of dark and dreadful deeds the times demanded of a nation should she expect to survive. Lincoln knew that with the things the Union Army could not be called upon to do, whether it was investigating dangers to the wounded country, to ferret out plots and schemes that threatened her, or eliminate potential problems before the public could even be aware of them. His Secret Service was essential to the health of the Union. Growth of the Union. The Army places its faith in themselves and their arsenal. Grant remained the general of the armies, and though his bitterest foe was no more, he began to view all threats to the Union equally. Despicable. He had seen the horrors of war. He had seen his family destroyed before his very eyes with terrible weapons unleashed by the covetous enlightened. He had seen the savages of the warring nation tear his beloved soldiers limb from limb. He was only one way his nation was going to survive this terrible time, and that was through strength. To the north, the Union's border stretches the length of the Dominion of Canada to the cold reaches of Russian Alaska, frontier territory of the most inhospitable kind. To the south, the war-ravaged and lawless hinterlands of Mexico still harbored rebels and dissidents contesting the Mexican absorption into the Union in May 1868. The army knew such challenges could not go unanswered. Whilst the northern borders are reinforced against Crown incursions and further reinforcements funneled into the west, the invasion of Gran Colombia in spring of 1869 ensued, but not only were future attacks on the Union's southern borders discouraged, but that further resources and territory enriched the lives and coffers of all the member states. Such rapid expansion requires the deployment of large garrisons of Union troops and ensures these new territories remain loyal to the manifest destiny that drives the Union ever onwards. Looking to repeat the gains made in Gran Colombia, the Union Army mobilizes itself once more, with an eye southward to newly emergent socialist unity of South America. The Union Ascendant. Building on the designs purchased from the Enlightened during the Civil War, Union military technology was mostly an effective mix of the innovative and reliable, though Carpathian and Enlightened continues to supply the Union with RJ fuel cells. The nation has warmed towards less fickle sources of innovation. Union manufacturers, such as Arlington and Chase, produce an array of functional but beautifully engineered weapons and operating systems. Tesla continues to contribute automata, designs and spark reactors for the military, as well as to improve the lives of the citizens of the Union. As a result, the war machines of the Union are well equipped with labour-saving devices for weaponry and control systems, allowing them to devote more crew space to their fighting complements, especially the Marine Corps sharpshooters. When it comes to offensive power in all spheres, the Union prefers relatively simple weapons, massed rocket batteries and big guns, lots of them. Land ships and rolling thunder battle tanks bristle with heavy cannons, whose long barrels, superior ammunition and automatic loaders allow them to lay down heavy barrages at extreme range. Union warships are driven by huge paddle wheels rather than propellers, allowing them to maneuver for far more efficiency than their great size would suggest. Reinforced with another enlightened development, Sturgeonium, these massive structures are very resistant to damage. Union airships, the core of its aerial forces, are also highly resilient beasts, filled with inert helium gas, a byproduct of the nation's oil industry. They can absorb immense amounts of punishment while dishing out huge quantities of their own. There is one thing that is all men and women who have answered the Union's call can agree on. With weapons and technology such as these, the Union of Federated States is still the greatest hope for instilling liberty and independence in the world. An uncertain age, the President says there will be time to return to the values that once made the nation a beacon of hope. At some point in the future, there will be peace again, and the time relinquishing weapons will come. Until that time, there can be no peace. Better to curtail freedom today, and the Union may live on to be an example for the rest of the world tomorrow. For without the Union, how else will freedom in the wider world prevail?